What comes to mind when you hear the word autism? Is it a disease that needs to be cured or fixed? Or is it difficulty in communicating, having problems with social skills, caused by bad parenting, or even vaccines? Hi, my name is Ivy, and I'm so happy that you're here with us on this journey on our third episode of Autism Stories. So today we are not only going to address all these questions, but we are going on a journey to learn and maybe unlearn some things we once knew about autism and some practical tips on how to support an autistic individual. Joining me with today on this episode is our special guest. She is none other than Dr. Zahilah Filzah Zulkifli. She is a consultant pediatrician with Malaysia's Ministry of Health and has over 2 decades of experience in the medical field. She holds a master's degree in Autism Studies from the University of Kent and is a licensed Spell Master Trainer. Dr. Zahilah is also an associate consultant with Autism, a UK-based organization providing global autism training and consultancy. She is also the founder of the Ark Autism Centre, a collaborative community project supporting autistic children and low-income families. So let's join together to welcome her. Hi, Dr. Zahilah.
Hello, Ivy.
Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to Autism Stories. I'm very excited for our conversation today.
I'm excited too.
Yes. So before we get into all these questions and discussions, I know you are a great storyteller.
Oh.
Yes. So would you be able to start with one maybe unforgettable story or experience that you have worked with an autistic individual?
There's a lot of stories, Ivy.
Absolutely, I'm sure.
A lot of stories. Many of them I've shared in my trainings. But maybe, perhaps one story stirred a lot of emotion in me, I would say.
Yeah.
Would be of this boy who was 6 when this happened. Yeah. He's non-speaking, right? At that time, he was just resting. He was on the beanbag, and he was just resting and relaxing. And he had his iPad with him, because he uses augmentative and alternative communication, or AAC, right? Yeah. To communicate. And previously, he had always used it to indicate what he wants and things like that, yeah? Maybe it could be food, it could be a game, or it could be a toy that he wanted. It was his rest time. And he was just relaxing, as I said. And it seems that, at that time, he seems to be just gazing, and then when we approached him, and the thing is that Ivy, sometimes understanding do not need words.
Yeah.
Silence is also communication. We sat beside him, just basically enjoying that moment with him, and he pressed, "I'm lonely." Right? I'm lonely. And the thing is, this is not the first child that have used an AAC and press, "I'm lonely." Wow. This wasn't my first child. So we need to really think about what that means. Yeah. Because when you look at studies involving autistic adults, many says that they have chronic loneliness. And that made me think about, all these things that we've always talk about when it comes to support for autistics, right?
Yeah.
It's always about, especially in children, it's always about getting them to speak, always about getting them to be able to control their emotions, to behave well, to behave as normal people, right? And to join in mainstream education. We tend to look at that, the whole thing, right? Moving them from what they can't do or perceive to not be able to do, to these sets of standards, right? And I'm wondering, for a long time, whether we're really aiming on the right thing. Yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's really, really powerful. On that, I was just really wondering, you have been practicing in this field for how long?
For over 20 years.
Over 20 years.
In the medical field, yeah.
I'm pretty sure that you have come across a lot of stereotypes, misconceptions around autism. So what are some of the misconceptions that you like to bring up?
There is this dual thinking when it comes to autism.
Yeah.
It's either autism is that superpower, savant geniuses, or autism being severely autistic, being pictured in that form. So
Yeah.
often when people talk about the spectrum, people think that autism is either you are severely autistic or mildly autistic.
Yeah.
And because of that, there is a tendency to overestimate those who we think have low support needs and underestimate those who we think or in general needs high supports, So an example would be when you see someone who is an autistic who is non-speaking, there is a lot of negative connotations that attach to it because for a very long time, myself included, we refer to them as non-verbal autistic, right?
Yes.
And there's negative connotations that attach to that word non-verbal because people
Yeah.
tend to think that non-verbal means they have no opinions, they have nothing to say, and they're not interested in saying anything, right? But what we realize now, and this comes with, advocacy coming from the autistic community themselves, the community itself, that many of the non-speaking autistic are able to communicate their needs if they are given other forms of communication.
Wow.
AAC, the augmentative and alternative communication, which basically means a communication modes apart from speech.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and what we realize now, when, for example, in tertiary education, in the West, where they allow their students, to come in, study a certain, for example, subject or a major, right, using completely AAC.
Wow.
So what it means is that failure to include autistics or neurodivergent, for that matter, is not because they are inherently neurodivergent, but because of the barrier that is exerted by people, by law, by policies, by stigma, by our fear.
Yeah.
And that's what's hindering the integration and inclusion of autistic people in healthcare, social, education, in employment. Yep.
Wow. Dr. Zahilah, I think you have pointed out a lot of things on that. I would love to unpack it a little bit. And because you've also mentioned the term neurodivergent, neurodiversity,
Right.
and I think, especially in a Malaysian context, whenever we think about autism, the word special needs will always come up.
Right.
And then nowadays we hear a lot of terms like neurodivergent, neurodiversity. Can you explain what are these terms?
Yeah, important conversation.
Yeah.
That's an important question, and we need to have this conversation. But oftentimes, what I see now is that neurodiversity has become a buzzword.
Oh.
Everyone speaks about neurodiversity. People are using the word neurotypical, neurodivergent. But I think what is missing, really missing in our conversation here in Malaysia is that what does neurodiversity really mean? Because people have this tendency to use that word, but couple with outdated perspective. We're still talking about autism, ADHD, or dyslexia, for example, from the deficit focus perspective. So when we talk about neurodiversity, what it means, in simply put, is that it's a natural variation of how the brain works. We have to realize that not everyone learned and experienced the world in the same way. So what it challenges is this assumption that everyone plays the same way, everyone learns the same way, everyone communicates the same way, everyone experiences the world the same way, and people solve problems the same way. And we know that's not the case, right? So we all have, there's different minds, different type of minds in this world. And there's no one way to be right, right? So if a person thinks, learned or experienced the world in the majority experience it, then you are called neurotypical. Or also referred to as neuromajority. Right? Yeah, neuromajority. Or if the way you think, the way you learn, the way you experience the world diverge from what is perceived as normal, right? Then you are called neurodivergent or neurominority. Yeah. So now the word neurodivergence, though, was actually coined by this autistic right activist by the name of Kasian Asasimasu. And she's autistic, she's also dyslexic. At that time, the conversation around neurodiversity was pretty much about autism, right? So, and we know that autism isn't the only neurodivergence. There's many other differences that is considered under the neurodivergence umbrella. Okay, so Kasian Asasimasu coined this word so that we can include other forms of neurodivergence.
That is simply means that autism is not something to be fixed.
No,
Not something needs to be cured.
not at all.
So it simply means that they just are wired differently. Their brains work differently, they see the world differently, they learn differently, they play differently.
Precisely.
All right. So that will lead to another question that, like I've come across a few point of view, like saying that, parents were saying that, my child's an autistic child and I'm going to sign them up for therapy so that they can become normal. What are your thoughts about that?
The thing is, Ivy, I once hold to that perspective. And for many of us, many of us had this understanding about conventional therapy and what the purpose should be when it comes to supporting autistics. Because the idea is that if you fix them, right, then they are able to fit into the society, right? Okay, so the idea is that for a lot of parents and even practitioners, right? Despite being well-meaning, when they think about the future and they think about what's going to happen if they are unable to speak, if they are unable to control their emotion, what if all these behaviors are going to limit their quality of life, right? And so the idea was that the best way is to teach them how to behave a way a neurotypical behaves. So that they're included, so that they're accepted in employment, they're accepted in school and whatnot. But what we also realize is that if this was really working, right? If this is really working, why is it that when we look at the stats, the autistics, and I'm talking about those without learning disabilities, right? So we're talking about those autistics with likely low support needs, who are able to speak, who are able to go to school and whatnot. And yet, the suicidal rate is 9 times higher. Why is it that 70% of autistic have at least one mental health challenge and at least 40% of them have 2 mental health conditions? The stats are high. Their life expectancy is 2 decades less than the general population. When we talk about autistic children, they are 28 times more to think about suicide. We need to take a moment and really think, what's not right here? So a lot of time when we think that we're fixing them and we're so happy seeing that, they are able to do this now, they're able to do that now. I mean, this whole idea about, autistic children will not be able to thrive, will not be able to learn if they are not given their entire time in a day are spent in therapy. Hours and hours just learning how to be as normal. And what do they learn in this? They learn to mask. And to the outsiders, we may be very happy and say, hey, look, he's not stimming. She's speaking, or she's not humming. See, she's able to control the emotion and whatnot. But there's other things at stake here. In the process of masking, or another word would be autistic camouflaging, meaning that you're suppressing yourself, right? Your autistic self, to be accepted by other people, to appear normal to other people, to fit in. And masking can be in many forms. Sometimes you might be suppressing your stimming, or the surrounding is actually very overwhelming for you, but you force yourself through. And now the thing is, I often say that, for even neurotypicals, we mask sometimes, right? We do mask. Everyone masks.
Yeah.
But the degree, the intensity, the frequency of masking in autistic is long, it's so deep that it is detrimental to their mental health.
Wow.
Right? And this all comes from what? From the fact that autism is always seen as a dirty thing. It's a dirty word. It's also seen like when you talk about deficit disorder, when people think about autism, people are just, the thought of it, of a child being autistic, it's just so scary. Because that's how, we've always, posted, right? That autism is just not right. Yep. How do we expect children who have been told from the time they were very young, and every little thing, that how they are supported, how therapy is done. Yep. Sometimes the helping professionals, sometimes without us realizing, if we hold on to ableism or this favoring of able body, it can come in many forms. The way we speak about autism, the way we treat a person. Sometimes we think it's well-meaning, we might think that it's not harmful. But as long as it's coming from the concept of deficit focus, right, it doesn't translate like that to the other person. Yeah. And so they don't feel accepted. They feel broken. They feel like they're not enough, they're not complete. They are subhumans. I watched this video that was made by a group of autistic, and this one autistic guy, and he said, "We are humans too." And when I think about that, right, for someone to have to say that, to remind the rest of the people that we are human too, I think that's really heart-wrenching. So for the rest of us, it's so important to understand neurodiversity, neurodivergence, and when we talk about acceptance is not just about, oh, you're autistic, okay. That's not what acceptance means.
Yes.
Every time we talk about acceptance, it's always about, oh yeah, he's autistic, I
Cool.
accept. So it's always a lip service.
Yeah.
It's all those slogans that you see during Autism Awareness or Acceptance Month, whatever you call it. But it doesn't come with real action. That's not acceptance.
What are some actions that we can do to, to say that we support and we accept them?
There's a lot, but let's just put some. Let's talk about something that is happening on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
For example, we know that autistics, many of them, may have differences in eye contact, which could range from not having eye contact to having like intense eye contact, right? So this idea about autistic cannot have eye contact is not true. And a lot of people think, for the neurotypicals, we think that, because this is how the neurotypical interaction works, right? If I'm paying attention to you, Ivy, I'll be looking to your eyes, right? I'll be nodding, I'll be smiling, and all that, right? But when we talk about the autistic interaction, that's not how it works, because they are able to hear better, focus better if they do not look at you, right? So to think that if, for example, someone's not looking and you're like, look at me when you're talking. That's not acceptance, because now you're forcing them. As it is, that's one of the coping mechanisms to be able to listen and pay attention to you better, because now they are, shutting like at least one sensory stimuli from coming in, which is the visual, right? So that they can hear you better. So they're focusing on the auditory aspect or the sound. But here we are enforcing that. Or making statement like, see, every time I talk to you, you're never you're never listening, you never pay attention. And those kind of words comes from ignorance, not understanding how autistic people interact.
Absolutely.
Of course, again, with stimming. Like when you see someone's flapping their hands, or someone who's like, fidgeting, or someone may say, oh, this is fidgeting, or they might be, seem restless in their seat. And let's say this is a job interview, Ivy, and you see someone's doing that. What's the likely perception that the interviewer will have. Not confident, maybe not a good candidate, right? Yeah, so I think understanding these differences very, very crucial. Because what happens when we don't is it leads to a lot of misunderstanding. It leads to, to sometimes to an extent that it leads to abuse, for example.
Something about steaming.
Right.
So what I learned from your training spell, which we will go into that a little bit later, but that was really a life-changing, perspective. Like, kaboom! I was like, what?
I'm glad.
So as a therapist, I was trained to, to set goals such as like maintaining eye contact for like, I don't know how many seconds or
Right.
how many times during a session, or even managing behaviors, right? That now that I know it's called steaming, right? And I think it comes now that I know that actually this is something that I'm not supposed to restrict them, that it's not a bad thing, and I think what you explain in spell, like how steaming works, like for neurotypical person, when someone is very nervous, they pace around, they use the pen and click,
Right.
like that's considered okay and acceptable, and that's also part of steaming. So why is it not acceptable when they flap their arms or do other forms of behaviors that is called steaming?
Right.
Yeah, so I think
Double standard.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think this is something that a lot of people, they might not be like you said, ignorance, and that's where advocacy, education comes in, and it's so important.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, but again, I was once that person too.
Yeah.
You remember? We all came from that time where that was what we thought was right, right? And that is why I think why now we're seeing this different understanding of autism.
Yeah.
Because I think, I mean, okay, let's just go back. Do you realize, or maybe you yourself in the past may have pondered, like, autism is such a mystery. Autism, is like a puzzle.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think the real issue is because we've never really listened to autistic voices.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So we don't listen to autistic voices. Every time when we talk about autism, it has always been from a practitioner perspective, from a therapist perspective, from parents' perspective.
Yeah.
Right? It is only of late that we're starting to get a lot more autistic self-advocates, who are being platformed to talk about autism and their experience. But globally, we're seeing this shift. Okay, we're seeing this shift because there are a lot more doctors, practitioners, therapists. There are a lot more teachers who are now in the field of autism, and they say, "Hey, we're not getting it right."
Yeah.
So all this theory in the past about why an autistic behave the way they behave, for example, or why they are the way they are, had always been from a neurotypical lens.
Wow.
Right? It had always been from a neurotypical lens. And we're talking about this differently now because I believe those who are in the field, be it pediatricians, psychiatrists, therapists, parents, teachers, we want to support autistic individuals, be it children or adults, in a way that is meaningful for them, in a way that is respectful, so that they can thrive in environments and also lead a good quality of life, right? And lead a good life. And the thing is, how would we know if we do not ask them? If we do not speak to them? And that is why now in universities, they're looking into participatory autism research, where the research is autistic-led. And as either led by an autistic researcher, with a neurotypical researcher, but you have an autistic researcher and autistic professionals that is giving, a better understanding of what autism really is and how support can actually be really meaningful for them. What works for typical people does not work for autistic people.
I have one question for you, Dr. Zahilah. So one thing that I've learned from SPELL, maybe you can start with that first. So what is SPELL and what is it? How does it help to support neurodivergent individuals?
Right, so SPELL is a framework, okay? It is a framework, it is not an approach. So you may have different kind of approaches, yeah? But basically it lay out what needs to be present, needs to be done to ensure that an autistic can be supported in a way that is ethical, respectful, yeah? It needs to be individualized because we know not one autistic is the same with the other, right? Oftentimes when a person is diagnosed autistic, we tend to refer, go see here, go do that, right? So it's all about what the autistic person needs to do. It has always been about that. So they work so hard to meet our expectations, right? That we have outlined for them. But what about us? You know, one thing that my ex-lecturer said, his name Dr. Damien Milton, who taught me in Masters in Autism Studies. Dr. Damien Milton is autistic himself, right? And he said this, he said, in class, he said, and there were, I think 4 or 5 other autistic adults there. Yeah?
In the class?
Wow. In that session at that time. He posed this question to the rest of us, right? Who are you to decide what is normal and what is not?
Oh,
right? To me, he said, me and my fellow autistic, we are normal and you are not. And I thought at that time, hey, that's a really a one important perspective, because from our lens, we think that everyone behaves the same way, everyone thinks the same way. So anyone that is a bit different, we think that that's abnormal. But for them, they know that they all think the same way, or rather, and we're not the ones who are like thinking or experiencing the way they are experiencing it, right? So the thing is, when we talk about, and he because he's also a sociologist, and he said this one thing that is, that hit me. For an interaction to happen, you need 2 people at least, right? Why is it that just one group of people are blamed for, say, a breakdown of that communication or breakdown of that interaction?
Wow.
Right? Because it takes 2 to tango. So how is it that only the autistic that have to do all the work, right? So SPELL, now coming back to SPELL, SPELL is about, simply put, is about what the rest of us can do, right? Because guess what? Their response, their behavior is not necessarily, and oftentimes it's not because of the reflection of their internal state, but because of a response to the environment, right? So if we want to support autistics to thrive, be it in any setting, then we too have got to do the work, right? So S stands for structure. Basically, you're looking at providing predictability, because it's like having a precise mind in a very chaotic world, right? And I think even for neurotypical, we would appreciate structure, knowing what will happen, what's going to happen next, and whatnot. P, positive approaches, attitude, and expectation. It means it has to be respectful. It has to be strength-based, right? You have to presume competence. If just because someone who is non-speaking and you think that they cannot communicate because they're non-speaking, so you are presuming incompetence and you do not want to provide any other form of communication. All their life, they've been going to learn just how to speak until one day someone call it off and say, okay, maybe he will not speak. And that's it. And that's not right. Because everyone, and as this autistic person said, Jordan Zimmerman, and she said, everyone has language, and everyone has a story to be told, Now, are we giving that opportunity for that person to tell us their story, right? I can't imagine, I can't even imagine it for a small kid, but imagine like a 30-year-old, a 40-year-old who is non-speaking, and everyone just sometimes speaks about him as though he's not there, as though he doesn't understand. And the non-speaking community have said that they understand every word we say. Because the thing, we tend to liken them to babies, because babies, when they're not speaking, they also don't understand, right? The thing about autistic non-speaking is because they do have the vocab, they do understand everything here. It's just that's all they're not doing. They're not speaking. Yeah, right. And imagine things being said in front of you, you know, and a lot of them could be misunderstood. And here you are not being able to explain yourself, right? Yeah. Presumed competence is important in that P. Empathy. Empathy for what? We often say, oh, I empathize with another autistic. Oh, I empathize with, you know. This empathy must come from the understanding of neurodiversity, that their brain is different. So it means that their sensory experience is different. So we must understand that. So as we're speaking now, Ivy, I am aware only of my voice, and I suppose for you too, right? But for an autistic, there's a lot. If you take a moment of silence here, there's so many other sounds that's occurring at the same time. And an autistic could be hearing the sound all at the same volume. And imagine having to maintain an eye contact with you, having to concentrate, and then being posed questions, for example, and people are not patient. One fast answer, no extra processing time given, for example. Yeah, that's not empathy. Yeah, empathy of their communication difference, for example. That's important too. And that's why when one autistic person I know, and he said, you know, all this slogan during Autism Awareness Month, they're just slogans. They're just words, right? Yeah. And that is why I think it is so crucial that we really talk about how they are different. If we believe they're different, you know, it's funny because we say different, not less. That's a very common, you know, every time during Autism Awareness or Acceptance Month. Different, not less. Different, not less. But we treat them like they're less. Now, having said that, right, I just want to make sure that people get this correctly, is that neurodiversity does not, you know, of course, we focus on strength-based support and whatnot, in neuro-affirming approach. It does not mean that we do not acknowledge that it is a disability. It is a neurodevelopmental disability. But when we're talking about what are they disabled by, and I'm sure if you remember in SPELL, I talk about the social model of disability, where the fear, stigma, opportunities not given, you know, universal building design, not thinking about their sensory needs. That all goes into empathy, and all these is what hinders the participation of autistic. So that's the E. And then we have L. The first L, is low arousal. So when we talk about low arousal, we have to understand that they have to process so many things in the environment. So imagine if there's so many things, so many colors, so many different, you know, all these serve as a trigger, as a stimuli, and they've got to process that a lot more. And low arousal is not just limited to the environment. Low arousal also is important when it comes to interaction and communication. Now, if I'm confrontational to you, right, scolding or, you know, or high arousal approaches, that is going to cause a lot of anxiety. So interaction needs to be calm, well-paced, and sometimes, like I said earlier, silence is also communication. But the thing about us is that, we are impatient. We speak really fast. We speak in really, really long sentence, very abstract, without understanding that the autistic person, you know, how to make it simple for the autistic person to process. And of course, the last L is link, because we can have all these great ideas, great approaches, but if we're not working together with the people who are supporting that autistic person or that neurodivergent person, then it's going to cause a lot of inconsistencies, and you're not conveying the same message, right? It's so it'll turn out to be chaotic. So we may not serve our purpose.
Yeah.
Right. So working together is really, really important. But it doesn't mean that everyone has to do the same thing. I think sometimes it's mistaken as we all have to do the same thing. We all no. But what it means that we have the same idea, the same concept about what it really means to truly support an autistic person.
Yeah. So good. Speaking about neuro-affirming approaches, what is it really, and what are some of the strategies that professionals, parents can better support autistic individuals?
Okay, so coming back to the concept of neurodiversity. So neurodiversity actually refers to everyone, okay?
Yeah.
When we talk about neurodiverse, it's neurotypical plus neurodivergent,
Yeah.
right? So, but the understanding, the fundamental or core concept of neurodiversity is understanding that it is a natural variation of the human mind. It's the diversity of the human mind.
Yeah.
So what it means to be neuro-affirming
Yeah.
is that we affirm that people have different ways of being, different ways of playing, different ways of learning. So when you understand, say, autism, right? So we've got to understand, I give you one example. One example would be, if we understand autism and that how their mind works,
Yeah.
they are monotropic. So what I mean by monotropic, monotropic is that at any given time, we all have limited attention, right? So for an autistic, those attention, all those attention tends to be pulled into one direction. And usually it's of things that they are interested in.
Yeah.
It could be their special interest or whatever that they are interested in at that time. And therefore, so it's also almost like you're pulling this attention into this tunnel. I like to describe it that way. So imagine a tunnel, all the attention is pulled into here. So it's monotropic. So everything that is within that tunnel, meaning that their interests, for example, the communication, the sensory are all happening within this tunnel because it creates a flow state, right? A flow state. And it's a happy flow state, right? Now imagine someone is doing something else. Maybe they are doodling and that's what they're really interested in. And someone comes and say, hey, you want to go and grab a sandwich? And he doesn't respond, for example, right? It doesn't mean he is ignoring. So it's easy to think that that autistic person is ignoring, that person is disengaged, right? When actually what they're doing is they are actually engaging within that their interests because their attention are being pulled in that one direction. So that is why for those supporting an autistic individual, right, be it children or adult, it's always good to join into this, right? Or sometimes you may want to give time, because not everyone likes it when you just suddenly intervene.
Yeah.
But what it means is that we need to be within their that monotropic field. Now, unlike typical people, you do something, I can shift my focus here and then I can attention, okay, then I have to do that and we're doing. So it's all over. Yeah. But the thing about monotropics, about monotropism, and this is a cognitive theory that was researched and coined by autistic researchers, right? And many autistic communities say it's like they resonate with that because for a very long time, what predominates was the theory of mind. So this theory of mind, this cognitive theory, comes from this understanding that an autistic does not understand a typical person's feeling and that they have a different thoughts, that they have different ideas. But actually now we know that it's not that. It's this monotropic focus. And so for you, if you really want to support, for example, an autistic person, then you would think about what is his special interest? What is he really interested in? And you want that approach to be autistic-led rather than
I want this and follow
no, this is my goal. This is what's going to happen in my therapy. Okay, I want to make sure that this, like you said, like having eye contact, having all that, you're going to tick all your checklists. When really it's about going into coming from a perspective of understanding. And that support will be so much better. I think the other thing is also because when we talk about neuro-affirming approach, we must also realize that how it differs from conventional approach, right?
Yeah.
Conventional approach is all having all these goals, right? All these goals that a person needs to attain, or, and these goals, we have to question these goals, right? Because is it coming from our perspective? Because we think that those are important. So strength-based, presumed competence. Sorry, I don't think I answered your question. But
okay.
for such a long introduction about what it is. But basically, if someone wants to support in a neuro-affirming way, it has to be a strength-based approach, one, right? Now, we understand that there are certain skills that are important, which that autistic person may not show signs that they may want to do it, for example. Not because they don't want to do it sometimes, because the expectation may not be clear. They could be having anxiety from the lack of explicit instruction that is given around that particular task, rather than not wanting to do it. Another thing is about embracing multimodal communication. So it's oftentimes a lot of approaches say, okay, say it, especially when there's learning how to speak. Okay, say the word, for example, when they are already communicating through other means. So there are other means of communicating. And if you think about it, even us neurotypical, we don't speak all the time. We communicate through our body language. Sometimes we write emails when we find it really hard to talk to our boss. Email would be much easier, right? Or a WhatsApp, or in writing. We don't talk all the time. So why is it that it's any different? And especially so now that we know for autistic, and I want to share you this story. I had this autistic in Papua New Guinea. So I've been in Papua New Guinea for some time. So we set up this autism clinic, and I had this boy, and he told, and out of the group, the rest were all non-speaking. He was the only one who could speak. And he told me, speaking is difficult. Speaking is difficult. And the thing is that there was a lot of misunderstanding about him, coming from school, from teachers. And his mom said the teachers have complained that he is poor in comprehension, he doesn't participate, and all that, right? But the thing is, sometimes all you need is to give extra processing time. You give a question, or you ask someone to do, and you expect them to move right and then. Right? And while speaking is effortless for most of us, it takes a lot of effort from them. And this too coming from those who can speak. Those autistic who are able to speak. In fact, many of them are really good speakers, and they can give talks, they're very good in public speaking. But when it comes to communication, like interacting, right, it is hard for them, right? And if we don't understand that, because we think, the other day you can speak really well, the other day you can do that task. So understanding that that the environment affects them. So it could be that during that time, the environment was really helpful. So, and because of that, they were able to express better, communicate better, or interact better, at least from the perspective of neurotypical. But when the environment is not, and suddenly they are unable to go to the standard that they used to, demonstrate before, then we start saying that you're just simply lazy. There's a lot of, you're lazy, you're not being disrespectful, you're not following demands, when it's actually hard for that person. So understanding multimodal communication is very important. Prioritizing lived experience, right, instead of your own goals is crucial. It's also part of the neuro-affirming approach. And when you talk about sensory integration, so you want to help them with their sensory challenges, but not with extinction in mind. So instead of, so some people think that, they're sensitive to sounds, let's expose them to a lot more sounds, right? And hopefully they will be, they get used to it and they adapt to it. But what we should be teaching, or at least advocating, is the use of self-advocacy tool. That when it's noisy, because how are we to know how much of a struggle that they're going through unless it's them, right? So when you allow and you advocate for use of self-advocacy tool, like all these sensory aids or fidget tools or a noise-cancelling headphones, and knowing that it's okay for them to put it on whenever they feel that it's triggering them or challenging for them, I think that is what we need to teach. what that we need to support them, to let them know if it's too much, you're allowed to leave. Instead of forcing themselves through to a point that it goes into meltdown, because then that's another experience, autistic experience that is poorly understood and often judged. And then so there's so many judging along the way, but you don't allow them to advocate for themselves, because all this advocacy that's coming from them is seen like escaping from demands, you know. They're running away from doing this and whatnot, you know. So yeah.
Absolutely. So I have a scenario that I would love to read to you, and then would love your thoughts or some recommendations on how to support them. All right, so we will call this boy Adam.
Right.
Yeah, so Adam is a 7-year-old autistic child who is highly intelligent and curious about topics he loves, such as dinosaurs and space. However, he struggles with sensory sensitivities, particularly to loud sounds and bright lights.
Right.
So when he's placed in noisy environments such as school assemblies and crowded places, he becomes overwhelmed, covers his ears, and may have meltdowns. He also finds it difficult to transition between activities, often getting very upset when asked to stop something he enjoys. So in situations like that, what are some neuroaffirming strategies that parents or teachers, therapists that can better support him?
Okay, so if we look at it from, say, spell perspective, the reason I like spell is because it allows you to audit the environment that the child is in. Now, if we know that this is a known stressor, right? It's a known stressor for this child, and every time that the child is placed in that environment, it has always resulted in dysregulation, in meltdowns or whatnot. Yeah, and yet we still keep sending him to that environment, right? Without modification of the environment, for example, this is a red or a violation of spell. So in this case, I think what is important is understanding that how he experienced it is very different from how the rest of the student experience it, right? But does this mean that he cannot be included in the assembly? So sometimes people may think that, okay, so he doesn't have to go to the assembly altogether, for example. That may not. Now you're presuming incompetence, right? So what is his trigger? It could be the loud noise. Can we support him with noise cancelling headphone, for example? Maybe we could give expectations as to how long this assembly is going to be. You know, some assemblies can be really, really long. And maybe we got to think about also, like, what's the whole purpose of having an assembly? I mean, I'm not saying that you can't have an assembly. You can, right? But you've got to look into, you know, all these different brain that actually may want to participate with it, but just can't. So maybe for Adam is providing him a noise cancelling headphone, give him a structure that tells him what to expect, allow him as well that choice and control, that when it gets overwhelming for him, that he is allowed to leave, right? Now the thing is, people have left assembly not just simply because of sensory. People could be, you know, sick and may not be able to join assembly too, right? There are many other reasons why a child may not be able to join an assembly, or an adult for that matter. And I think understanding his sensory needs should also be one of it. Instead of, oh, okay, you're not sick, you shouldn't be leaving. Only sick people can leave this assembly, for example. Then no. But again, like I said, putting a structure that expectations be there, because for many of the autistic, they want to be included, they want to be part of it, but they struggle so much with it. But knowing that they now have a tool that they can use to reduce that struggle, knowing that they have a choice and control to leave when it's really, it's causing them dysregulation, that's lessen the anxiety. Because when you feel stuck, when you have no control over yourself, is when the anxiety is going to go sky high. But when you know, people have said, you know, and have reassured that you can leave if it's too much, you know, right? For example, that gives you a sense of power, you know, a sense of determination, right? So yes, that's one of the things. But of course, again, coming back to neuroaffirming, you know, all the struggles that he goes through, it always goes back to the people who are supporting. Are we auditing? What is it? What is the problem? Sometimes what we are seeing are just behaviors.
Yeah.
And the thing about behavior, it's what you see, right? So you might look, so we have to reframe our understanding around behavior. So imagine the iceberg. So you see the tip of the iceberg, but the rest of it is below the sea, for example, right? And what you're seeing could be aggressiveness. You could see a child who's screaming, who's rolling on the floor and whatnot, right? What we don't see is that lack of autonomy or control, inability to express themselves. If there's no way to express yourself in other form, behavior will become the only way to express it.
Yeah.
And all we're seeing is that, and the thing about behavior is not necessarily, and oftentimes it's not, the thing that happens before it is the cause of the behavior. This whole, like, chronic loneliness, post-traumatic stress disorder, it could be a co-occurring mental health condition. You know, that sensory, all those sensory challenges is what causing all this behavior. So I think for the ones supporting the teachers and whatnot, and also, of course, it's not just the teachers, it's also the classmates, the schoolmates, right?
Yeah.
The makcik canteen or the security guard, and having this understanding that, what a struggle to go through a world that is not built with you in mind. A school that is not built with you in mind. For example, it could be very bright, right? The walls could be filled with so many photos and so many pictures, and it's so stimulating.
Yeah.
On top of all the other, the things that is overwhelming for the child. So, yeah, I think we need to start there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Dr. Zahilah, I have a few more questions. These are really short questions, which I also think those are quite important as well. One is that, can autism be prevented during pregnancy?
No, it cannot. Autism is hereditary.
Okay.
Yeah. A neurodivergent child comes from a neurodivergent parent, neurodivergent family. Yeah. I know you might be referring to some studies that looks into, I give you an example, like what has been researched, maybe prematurity, maybe mothers who take certain medication when she was pregnant, father's age, it's been associated with increased paternal age. But all those are correlation. So just because you see that is a correlation of these occurrence with autism, does not mean it's a causation. It doesn't mean that it's the cause for it. So correlation does not equal causation, right? Again, because of the way we frame autism, right? Nobody says, "Hey, congratulations, you have an autistic child." Nobody says that, right?
Yeah.
It's always been framed in the way that this is bad news. I'm sorry that I've got to tell you from my assessment, those kind of thing. Like, I'm sorry that he is actually autistic. It has always been, I think, posed in a negative way.
Yeah.
And if it's posed in a negative way, it's not surprising for people to look at it as, and again, because we frame it as a disorder, then one would think, how does this disorder happen? How did it goes out of order? Right? And so people are always looking for reasons. Yeah. People often blame vaccination. Right? Some people blame Wi-Fi.
Oh, I've never heard of that.
All sorts of stuff that are being studied, right? Because much of the money for autism research grants goes to biology, meaning finding the cause for it, finding the risk factors for it. Because when you think about it as a disorder, you are wanting, okay, how can we prevent this? A life of autistic does not matter. It's not valuable. I think because the way it is framed and because of our ableism, right? We always see, and we forget that disability is part of life. It is part of the human experience, disability. Right? Some of us, who knows, in old age, may be disabled,
Yeah.
right? And because of this ableism, and we favor able-bodied, and we defined normal as certain sets of neuronormative standards, based on neuronormative standards, then you look at it as a bad thing. And when you look at it as a bad thing, then you will tend to want to fix it. When you want to tend to fix it, you are not going to use methods that is actually helping. You may get results. Yeah? Don't get me wrong. You may get results that could be out of compliance. Someone feels that they need to perform during that therapy, for example. So it's so important that we support them in authentic way, right? Yeah, so that they can be the way they are. So you're giving all these things, supporting them, and yet we're having all this conversation, right, around what's the cause, and I think definitely did not have this perspective before. But one thing that changed me definitely is looking at autistic lived experience, which I learned a lot during my masters, but also being friends with autistics and realizing they're just different, And if I can't respect the way that they interact and communicate, right? And I do my part, because it's always them who do their part, right?
Yeah.
The interaction, the communication can be so meaningful and profound. It could be really amazing. Yeah. And so I don't look at autism or autistic as being a disorder, as a deficit. I learn so much more about kindness, empathy from them. It's funny when people say autistic lacks empathy. One of the misconceptions, right? Autistic lacks empathy, just simply because that their face may not show understanding. Just because their face could be, they may not show facial expression. It doesn't mean that they don't feel it, right? And because we're so much into superficial, so we are, we decipher people's emotion through their facial expression, the way they sit, the way they behave, the way their body moves. And sometimes I feel it is us who's not empathetic. It is us who is rigid compared to the, Yeah. So I think this whole idea is to, again, listen to autistic voices.
Absolutely. Wow. I think we've covered a good amount of things today through our conversation. But if you have one last message that you would like to convey to anyone about autism, what would that be?
Actually, Ivy, I just said it, but I'm just gonna emphasize it again.
Yes.
Right? Because there are many things that we could say, but if that's just one thing, I would say listen to autistic voices. Be it a child or an adult, listen to their experience. Listen to their lived experience, understand their sensory needs, respect their individuality and their identity and the person they are, And I think you will realize there's a lot more, to them than we think, than how we describe. Yeah, I often say this. I must have said this during spell, even during your time. Donna Williams said, and she's the late Donna Williams is an autistic advocate, and she said, from the time the word autism was coined, so the word autism was coined back in the 1911, it has always been described by its appearance and not by how it is experienced. Right? I think this is a very powerful quote coming from an autistic herself. And that is why, if anything, if you are an advocate of, you support autistic children or support autistic adults, you might be a teacher, a doctor, a therapist. We have to amplify autistic voices. What's funny is that here we are supporting them. Let's talk about children. Many of us in the field of supporting autistic, here we are supporting children. And then when they're adults, how is it that we're not listening to them? Right? An autistic child will become an autistic adult. An autistic child will not become a neurotypical. A neurodivergent child will not become a neurotypical adult.
Wow.
Okay? Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Ivy.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So before we end, if there's anyone who like to connect with you, or even you host workshops, trainings regularly, right?
Yep.
So where can people find out about more information about that?
You can check out my Instagram. I
Yes.
post it on my Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, Zahilah Filzah. Or you can head to the Ark Autism Centre, Instagram or TikTok, or Space A, Instagram or TikTok.
All right. Okay. All right. I think that's about it for today. Thank you so much again, Dr. Zahilah. This has been
Thank you, Ivy.
incredible, and I have been just so impacted by whatever you have shared. From Spell until now.
I'm
so
glad. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all that you have done for the autism community and beyond. You are truly an inspiration.
Thank you so much, Ivy.
Thank you.
I feel like I didn't even breathe.
It was good. It was good. It was good.
Banyak kata-kata I macam lagi good lah. What is the word that I want to say?
I hope you enjoyed this episode today as much as I did filming it with Dr. Zahilah. So if you've learned a thing or two, or you have some highlights from this episode, share with us on this comment below, and we would love to hear it. And if you're able to do it, please help us to share this on your social media and with your friends and family. Before we wrap up, we'd like to give a special thanks to Sunway Putra Mall for sponsoring the venue of this episode. We're currently filming at the Calm Room, and if you don't already know, they have an awesome initiative called the Autism that has a lot of facilities and resources to support autistic individuals. So do check out their website for more information. And for next week will be our final episode for Autism Stories. So you wouldn't want to miss it, as we'll be featuring a theme song and a group of Neurodivergent students from Beacon Life Training Center. So stay tuned for next week, and see you.